Chevrolet once built the fastest Corvette the world had ever seen, and then told everyone it did not exist. In 1963, deep inside the engineering department in Warren, Michigan, a small team assembled 5 lightweight racing Corvettes with a single purpose: destroy Carroll Shelby's Cobra on every road course in America. They were faster, more radical, and more dangerous than anything Chevrolet had ever bolted together. General Motors never approved them. When corporate leadership found out, they ordered the program killed and the cars destroyed. The cars survived anyway. They scattered into private hands, raced under borrowed names, and disappeared from public record for nearly 2 decades. This is the story of the Corvettes Chevrolet tried to bury, and the engineer who risked his career to build them. To understand why Chevrolet had to build these cars in secret, you need to go back to 1957 and a decision that reshaped the American automobile industry overnight. That year, under mounting pressure from Congress, safety advocates, and a public increasingly alarmed by the death toll on American highways, the Automobile Manufacturers Association adopted a voluntary resolution. The terms were straightforward. No more factory-sponsored racing, no more performance advertising tied to speed records, no more horsepower wars in the showroom. Every major American automaker signed on. General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, and American Motors all agreed to step back from competition and present themselves as responsible corporate citizens. On paper, the ban was absolute. In reality, it was a gentleman's agreement with no enforcement mechanism, and it held together about as well as most gentlemen's agreements do. Ford began quietly funding racing efforts through its dealer network and independent teams within months. Chrysler found its own workarounds through back-channel relationships with racing shops. By the early 1960s, the ban had become a convenient fiction that manufacturers honored in press releases and ignored everywhere else. General Motors was the exception. GM was the largest corporation on Earth, the most politically visible, and the most exposed to congressional scrutiny. The executive suites on the 14th floor of GM headquarters in Detroit treated the racing ban not as a suggestion, but as corporate policy with the weight of law behind it. Division heads who even hinted at factory racing involvement faced serious professional consequences. Engineering budgets were monitored. New projects were reviewed for any connection to competition. The message from the top was unambiguous. Build fast cars for the street if you want. But the moment you put a General Motors car on a racetrack with company resources behind it, your career at this corporation is finished. For most GM divisions, this was a nuisance. For Chevrolet, it was something closer to an existential crisis. The Corvette was America's only true production sports car, and its entire identity was built on performance. It sold because buyers believed it could run with a Jaguar or outgun a Porsche on a winding road. Without racing, without lap times and trophies and magazine headlines about victories, the Corvette was selling on reputation alone. Corvette sales in the early 1960s were healthy, but the car's competitive credibility had been built on results from Sebring, Daytona, and Le Mans in the mid-1950s. Take away the racing, and you take away the evidence. Buyers can read specification sheets, but specification sheets do not win arguments in parking lots. Trophies do. And now a man from Texas was collecting those trophies with a car that cost a fraction of what the Corvette program had spent, backed by the one manufacturer in Detroit that had nothing to lose by embarrassing General Motors. Carroll Shelby had been a racing driver, a chicken farmer, and a dreamer, roughly in that order. By 1961, he had retired from driving due to a heart condition and relocated to Southern California with a plan so simple it sounded reckless. Take a lightweight British roadster, the AC Ace, strip it down, and drop a Ford V8 into the engine bay. The result was the Shelby Cobra, and it would change everything about the American performance car landscape. The Cobra was not elegant. It was a narrow, low-slung roadster with an engine that seemed too large for the chassis containing it. It was violent to drive, unpredictable in the corners, and devastatingly fast in a straight line. On a road course, where races were won by cars that could accelerate, brake, and turn with equal conviction, the Cobra was lethal. It weighed far less than a Corvette and carried an engine with comparable power. The math was simple and the result was predictable. The Cobra started winning. Ford was happy to supply the engines. Ford wanted to beat General Motors at anything, and watching a Ford-powered car humiliate the Corvette at racetracks across the country was exactly the kind of advertising money could not buy. The first Cobras appeared in SCCA competition in 1962, and the results were immediate. The first full season was a declaration of intent. Shelby's cars were entering races that the Corvette had dominated and posting lap times that Corvette drivers simply could not answer. The weight advantage was relentless. A Cobra weighed several hundred pounds less than a Corvette Stingray, and on a tight road course where braking and cornering mattered as much as straight-line speed, those missing pounds translated directly into seconds per lap. The Corvette was a fast car built on a passenger car platform. The Cobra was a racing car that happened to be street legal. The distinction mattered enormously when the flag dropped. Back in Warren, Michigan, one man watched all of this with growing fury. Zora Arcus-Duntov was a Belgian-born, German-educated engineer who had dedicated his professional life to making the Corvette the best sports car in America. He had developed the fuel injection systems, the performance suspension packages, and most of the engineering that gave the Corvette its credibility on and off the track. He knew the car's strengths and its limits, and he understood exactly what the Cobra represented. If Chevrolet could not answer Shelby on the track, the Corvette's claim to being a serious performance machine was finished. The problem was the ban. Duntov could not build a race car. He could not fund a racing program. He could not even be seen talking to racing teams about Corvette development. Corporate would shut him down before the first engine was assembled, so Duntov made a decision that would define his legacy. He decided not to ask. What Duntov did next became one of the most celebrated acts of engineering defiance in American corporate history. Working with a small, trusted group of engineers and fabricators, he launched a clandestine program to build a purpose-built racing Corvette that could beat the Cobra at its own game. The car would be dramatically lighter than the production Stingray, more aerodynamic, and powered by an engine that existed nowhere in Chevrolet's official catalog. It would carry the Corvette name on its flanks. It would be built to the same engineering standards as the finest European racing machines, with the kind of attention to weight savings and aerodynamic efficiency that Chevrolet's production engineers would never have approved for a car that customers could buy at a dealership, and nobody on the 14th floor was going to hear about it until it was already winning. The project received an internal designation that would become legendary: the Grand Sport. Duntov's original vision was ambitious beyond reason. He planned to build a run of roughly 125 cars, enough to qualify the model for GT-class competition under the International Racing Federation's homologation rules. Every single one would be hand-built, stripped of every unnecessary component, and fitted with a specially prepared engine designed to produce power figures that Chevrolet would never acknowledge in writing. The engineering started behind closed doors. Duntov's team operated outside normal development channels, using budgets that were creatively allocated to other projects and workshop space that was officially assigned to unrelated work. The body shell started with the familiar Stingray shape, but was constructed from fiberglass panels thinner and lighter than anything on the production line. The frame was extensively modified, drilled with lightning holes at every structural point where integrity would allow it. The doors, hood, and rear deck were fabricated from the thinnest material the team could source. Windows were replaced with lightweight alternatives. The brake cooling ducts were enlarged. The fuel system was redesigned for rapid refueling during pit stops. The cockpit was stripped to bare essentials, with lightweight bucket seats and a functional instrument cluster that told the driver exactly what he needed to know and nothing more. Every bracket, every mounting point, every piece of hardware was evaluated by a single unforgiving question. Does this weigh more than it needs to? Every modification served a single purpose: make this car faster on a racetrack than anything Carroll Shelby could build. The engine was the program's centerpiece and its most closely guarded secret. Duntov specified an aluminum block V8 displacing 377 cubic inches, fitted with fuel injection and tuned to produce power in the neighborhood of 550 horsepower. The exact figure was never officially confirmed, and that ambiguity was deliberate. Confirming the number would mean confirming the car existed as a factory project, and confirming that would mean confirming Chevrolet was violating the racing ban. The weight target was staggering. Duntov wanted the Grand Sport under 2,000 pounds, roughly 1,000 pounds lighter than the production Stingray sitting in dealership showrooms across the country. Shedding a third of the car's weight while nearly doubling its power output was not routine engineering. It was a declaration of war aimed at Carroll Shelby and hidden from General Motors. 5 cars were completed, not 125. 5. The program never survived long enough to reach Duntov's production target, but those 5 chassis, numbered sequentially, would prove to be more than enough to make history, and more than enough to bring the program to the most painful end imaginable. The first Grand Sport appeared in competition in late 1963, and the reaction from the racing community was immediate. The car was fast, not just Corvette fast, not just competitive, but genuinely, alarmingly fast. The combination of the lightweight body, the oversized engine, and the stripped-down chassis produced a power-to-weight ratio that nothing in the GT classes could match. Drivers who climbed into the cockpit described a machine that demanded absolute concentration. It rewarded precision and punished hesitation. A car that could make a skilled driver look brilliant and an average one look reckless. Word traveled through the paddock with the speed that only racing gossip can achieve. The Corvette Grand Sport was not a modified street car entered by an enthusiastic amateur. It was a purpose-built race car wearing a Corvette body, and everything about it, the construction quality, the exotic engine, the obsessive weight reduction, pointed unmistakably to a professional factory effort. Anyone who walked up to a Grand Sport and looked closely could tell that this machine had not been assembled in someone's home garage. It had Chevrolet written all over it, in every weld, every fitting, every precisely machined component. For a brief charged period, the Grand Sports raced under a thin veil of plausible deniability. They were entered by private teams driven by accomplished competitors and maintained by mechanics who happened to have suspiciously close relationships with Chevrolet Engineering in Warren. The arrangement was an open secret in the paddock. Everyone knew where the cars came from. Nobody was supposed to say it out loud. The Grand Sports ran against Cobras, Ferraris, and Jaguars, and they were competitive with all of them. On a good day, on the right track, with a capable driver, a Grand Sport could run with anything on 4 wheels. At Nassau in the Bahamas, where the annual Speed Weeks attracted the finest sports and racing cars from around the world, a Grand Sport competed against factory-entered machines in front of crowds that understood exactly what they were watching. The car's performance there, against a field that included some of the most expensive and sophisticated racing machinery in existence, confirmed everything Duntov had promised on paper. His engineering had delivered exactly what he set out to build, a Corvette that could fight the Cobra and win. But the very success that validated the program also sealed its fate. The Grand Sport was too fast, too obviously professional, and too visible to remain hidden. Reports reached the automotive press. Photographs appeared in magazines. Questions were asked in forums that General Motors could not afford to ignore. Those questions reached the 14th floor. The response from General Motors corporate was swift, absolute, and delivered without room for interpretation. The order came from the highest levels of management. The Grand Sport program was terminated, effective immediately. No more development, no more racing, no more cars. Chevrolet was instructed to recall all 5 completed Grand Sports and destroy them. The reasoning was corporate logic at its most brutally pragmatic. General Motors had signed the AMA racing ban. The Grand Sport program was a direct, documented violation of that agreement, conceived in secret, funded through creative accounting, and executed behind the backs of the corporation's senior leadership. The fact that Ford was violating the same ban with the Cobra did not matter to the lawyers on the 14th floor. The fact that the ban itself was becoming a joke across the industry did not matter either. What mattered was liability, appearances, and control. General Motors engineers had defied corporate policy, and someone needed to demonstrate that defiance carried consequences. Duntov was devastated in a way that went beyond professional disappointment. He had invested years of engineering work, called in favors across the company, and put his own standing at risk to build the Grand Sport. The car worked. It was fast. It was competitive. It was everything he had designed it to be. And now it was being killed, not because it had failed, but because it had succeeded too visibly. The Grand Sport had proven that the Corvette could compete with the best racing cars in the world, and General Motors' response was to pretend the proof did not exist. The instruction to destroy the 5 cars was explicit. Corporate wanted the evidence gone, but Duntov and the people around him found ways to resist that order without openly defying it. The 5 completed Grand Sports were not sent to the crusher. Instead, they were quietly moved out of Chevrolet's direct control. Some were transferred to private individuals who had existing relationships with the engineering team. Others were placed with racing figures who understood the value of what they were receiving and asked no uncomfortable questions. The paperwork surrounding these transfers was deliberately incomplete, the kind of vague documentation that creates enough ambiguity to protect everyone involved while ensuring that the cars themselves survive. Chevrolet's official position crystallized into a carefully constructed denial. The Grand Sport program had never been a factory racing effort. The 5 cars were experimental prototypes disposed of through normal surplus channels. Any racing that had occurred was the independent activity of private owners, not the responsibility of Chevrolet or General Motors. This was the story the company told, and it maintained that story with remarkable consistency for the next 2 decades. Once the Grand Sports escaped Chevrolet's orbit, they began entirely new existences in the hands of private owners and racing teams. Free from corporate oversight and its suffocating caution, the 5 cars were modified, repainted, renumbered, and raced with an intensity that would have horrified the accountants on the 14th floor. Some of the most prominent names in American motorsport drove Grand Sports during this period. Dick Thompson, a dentist from the Washington area known in the racing world as the Flying Dentist, was among the first to campaign a Grand Sport in serious competition. Thompson was already one of the most successful Corvette racers in the country, and the Grand Sport gave him a weapon that matched his talent. He drove with a precision that was distinctive, clean, and calculated in a way that reminded people his other profession required steady hands. He understood the Grand Sport's handling characteristics deeply, and he extracted performance from the car that validated every one of Duntov's engineering choices. When Thompson put a Grand Sport on a starting grid, the other competitors knew they were not racing against a wealthy amateur with a fast car. They were racing against a professional driver in a machine built by the best engineers in the American automobile industry. Roger Penske, then a young driver building the early stages of what would become one of the most powerful organizations in all of professional racing, also spent time behind the wheel of a Grand Sport. So did Jim Hall. the innovative Texan engineer and driver who would later build the groundbreaking Chaparral cars and reshape the way people thought about racing aerodynamics. The cars competed at road courses across the country and beyond. They raced at the Nassau Speed Weeks, at tracks in the Southeast and the Midwest, against international fields of the highest caliber. They proved that Duntov's engineering, even without the polish and development time that a full factory program would have provided, was fundamentally sound. But racing is hard on machinery, and the Grand Sports absorbed punishment that would have ended lesser cars. They were crashed, repaired, and sent back out. Components were swapped between chassis when parts were scarce. Body panels were replaced, engines were rebuilt, and mechanical specifications drifted from the original configurations as each car accumulated its own unique history of modification and repair. Keeping track of which chassis was which and what each car contained relative to its original build became a puzzle that would occupy automotive historians for decades. By the early 1970s, most of the Grand Sports had been retired from active competition. The muscle car era was winding down. Racing had evolved toward newer technologies and faster machinery. The 5 Corvettes that Duntov had built to beat the Cobra sat in garages and storage facilities across the country, their racing days behind them, their maker still refusing to acknowledge they had ever existed as factory cars. The resurrection of the Grand Sport story happened not because Chevrolet decided to talk, but because independent historians decided it was time to find out what actually happened. Through the late 1970s and into the 1980s, automotive researchers and journalists began tracking down the people who had been involved in the original program. They located retired engineers who were finally willing to speak openly. They found corporate documents that had survived internal housekeeping. They interviewed drivers, mechanics, team owners, and collectors who had handled the cars over the preceding 2 decades. Many of the engineers who had worked on the program spoke with a mixture of pride and lingering caution. Even decades later, some were reluctant to provide specific details about funding and authorization, as though the 14th floor might still be listening. The drivers were less circumspect. They remembered the cars vividly, described them in technical detail, and made no secret of the fact that the Grand Sports had been factory machines in every meaningful sense. The picture that emerged was richer and more compelling than the cars themselves. The Grand Sport story was not just about 5 racing Corvettes. It was about the culture of General Motors in the early 1960s, about the tension between engineers who believed in their work and executives who believed in order. Duntov had challenged the most powerful corporation in the world from inside its own walls, using its own resources, and he had been punished for succeeding. The Grand Sport became a parable about what happens when bureaucracy meets conviction, and bureaucracy wins the battle but loses the war. Chevrolet's official silence on the subject softened gradually over the following years. By the mid-1980s, the company began allowing references to the Grand Sport in corporate materials. By the 1990s, the transformation was complete. Chevrolet was not just acknowledging the Grand Sport, but celebrating it. The name was revived as a production trim level, applied to special edition Corvettes that paid homage to the original 5 racing cars. What had once been a corporate embarrassment had become a marketing asset, a story of daring and engineering excellence that Chevrolet was now eager to claim as its own heritage. The 5 surviving chassis became objects of almost mythological value within the collector car world. Each is documented and accounted for, and each carries a provenance that connects it back to Duntov's secret program. When a Grand Sport appears at a major auction, the bidding is measured in millions. They sit alongside pre-war European exotics as some of the most treasured automobiles on Earth, valued not only for their mechanical qualities but for the story they carry. The Corvette Grand Sport occupies a position in American automotive history that no other car quite duplicates. It is not the rarest car ever built. Other machines were produced in smaller numbers. It is not the fastest Corvette ever made. Later generations with more advanced technology surpassed the Grand Sport's performance by wide margins, and it is certainly not the most beautiful because 5 decades of Corvette design have produced shapes far more refined. What makes the Grand Sport singular is the story of its creation. Every other legendary racing car, the Shelby Cobra, the Ford GT40, the Porsche 917, was built by a company that wanted the world to know what it had made. The Grand Sport was built by engineers who had to hide their work from their own employer. It was conceived in defiance, constructed in secret, and then disavowed by the corporation that funded it. For 20 years, Chevrolet pretended the program never happened, and for 20 years, the 5 cars that survived carried a history that their maker refused to acknowledge. Duntov understood something about the Corvette that the executives above him did not. A sports car without racing is a shape without a purpose. The Corvette needed competition not for the sales charts or the press clippings, but for its identity. Without the discipline of the racetrack, without the pressure of having to beat a Cobra corner by corner and a Ferrari lap by lap, the Corvette was just another nameplate in General Motors' enormous product catalog. Duntov built the Grand Sport because he believed the car deserved more than that. That belief cost him politically within the corporation. His relationship with GM management was permanently strained by the Grand Sport affair. But within the engineering community, and among the racing drivers and enthusiasts who understood what the car represented, Duntov's standing only grew. He had been willing to put his position on the line for a principle, and the principle was simple. A Corvette that does not race is only half a Corvette. He was proven right in the most vindictive way possible. When General Motors finally abandoned the racing ban in the mid-1960s and allowed the Corvette to compete openly, it was the engineering foundation that Duntov and his team had laid in secret that gave the effort its starting point. The Corvette racing program that followed, spanning decades of competition at the highest levels of international motorsport, traces a direct conceptual line back to 5 hand-built cars assembled behind a locked door in Warren, Michigan. 5 cars, built in secret, ordered destroyed, saved by the people who made them, denied for 20 years, and today, worth more than almost any American car ever built. Every Grand Sport is accounted for today. All 5 chassis tracked, restored, and valued at figures that would have astonished the engineers who assembled them in that quiet corner of the Chevrolet facility. Duntov planned to build 125. Those 5 outlasted every corporate memo, every order to stop, and every institutional attempt to pretend they were never real. They are the proof that one engineer's conviction can outlast an entire corporation's denial. The next video is on screen now. If you stayed for the whole story, hit subscribe. I will see you in the next one.